Have you ever realized your own flesh and blood would sell you out for a supercar? When my grandfather secretly shoved a $60,000 check into my hand, my brother locked the door and slapped me blind to steal it back. He thought that strike would break me. Instead, it woke a digital monster. I am going to use the very technology he worships to burn his fake billion-dollar empire to ashes. Hello to the wonderful audience of Maya Revenge Stories. Unfortunately, YouTube has disabled our monetization features, leaving us without the budget to keep this channel operating. If you find today's story engaging, please consider supporting us with just $1 so we can provide our hardworking staff with the means to pay their living expenses and continue creating incredible stories for you. You can easily support us by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the donation link located in the description or the pinned comment of this video. My name is Elisa Horton, and this is my story. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of my 30th birthday, but in this multi-million-dollar oceanfront mansion in Miami, I was nothing more than a ghost haunting my own party. The air was thick with the suffocating scent of expensive floral arrangements and the clinking of crystal champagne flutes. Outside, the waves crashed against the private beach, but inside, the atmosphere was a suffocating theater of fake smiles and strategic handshakes. My parents, Arthur and Beatrice, floated through the sea of venture capitalists and local politicians, completely ignoring the daughter they were supposedly celebrating. To them, I was just a disappointment, the quiet cybersecurity nerd who chose the shadows of a computer screen over the blinding lights of high society. The real star of the evening, as always, was my older brother, Julian Horton. He stood in the center of the grand living room, holding court like a newly crowned king. Julian was hailed by the Miami elite as a tech prodigy, the brilliant mind behind a revolutionary financial technology startup that was currently circling a massive Series A funding round. He wore a custom-tailored Italian suit that cost more than my car, flashing a blinding, predatory smile at anyone holding a checkbook. Clinging to his arm was his wife, Vanessa. She was draped in diamonds and a silk gown that screamed generational wealth, looking down her perfectly sculpted nose at the catering staff. Together, they played the roles of modern royalty flawlessly, projecting an image of absolute perfection, but I knew the rot that lived beneath their designer clothes. Unable to stomach another second of the charade, I slipped away from the deafening music and the hollow laughter. I walked down the long, heavily carpeted hallway toward the isolated west wing of the estate. The music faded into a low, thumping bass. I was heading to see the only person in this family who ever actually loved me. My grandfather, Victor. He was 78 years old. 6 months ago, he suffered a mild stroke. It should have been a minor setback, a warning sign to slow down. Instead, Julian saw an opportunity. Within days of the hospital discharge, Julian brought in a highly paid, utterly corrupt private doctor who officially diagnosed Grandpa Victor as mentally incompetent. Using that fabricated medical report, Julian locked him away in this dimly lit, heavily monitored room at the back of the house, strictly forbidding any outside contact or independent communication. I quietly turned the brass handle and stepped into the oppressive darkness of his room. The air was stale, smelling faintly of sterile medical wipes and heavy lavender. Grandpa Victor sat in a high-backed leather armchair facing the window, staring blankly out at the pitch-black ocean. He looked frail. His shoulders slumped under a heavy wool blanket. I approached him slowly and knelt beside his chair. I gently placed my hand over his cold, wrinkled fingers. I expected the usual vacant stare, the terrifying emptiness that the doctor claimed was permanent brain damage. Instead, something incredible happened. The moment my skin touched his fingers clamped down on my wrist with astonishing strength. I gasped, my eyes flying up to meet his face. The foggy, vacant look was completely gone. His eyes were razor-sharp, entirely lucid, and burning with a desperate, frantic energy. He was completely awake, and he was terrified. Before I could even process the shock, he used his free hand to shove a crumpled piece of thick paper into my palm. His grip on my wrist tightened. pulling me closer until his face was inches from mine.
"Elisa, listen to me very carefully," he whispered, his voice raspy but steady, stripped of any confusion. "Take this. Hide it. Do not let them see it."
I looked down at the paper. I carefully unfolded the edges. It was a handwritten check, drawn from a private account I did not recognize. The amount made my breath catch in my throat. $60,000. Grandpa, what is this? I breathed out, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs. They said you could not even recognize us anymore. Lies, he hissed, his eyes darting toward the heavy wooden door. It is all lies to keep me caged. You have to take that check to a man named Marcus Thorne. He is the senior manager at Equinox Heritage Bank. Only him. Do you understand? You have to run. Elisa, leave this house tonight and do not look back. Julian is bleeding me dry. He is taking everything, and if he finds out I gave this to you, he will destroy you too. A cold chill washed over my entire body. I wanted to ask him 100 questions. I wanted to know how long he had been pretending, how he managed to write the check, and what Julian was actually doing with his money. But the universe did not grant me the luxury of time. The heavy oak door was violently kicked open, slamming against the wall with a deafening crack. Julian stood in the doorway, his charismatic party smile entirely wiped away. His face was twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. His eyes instantly locked onto the piece of paper trembling in my hand. "What did you just take from him?" Julian growled, his voice dropping an octave, sounding like a predatory animal cornering its prey. "Nothing," I lied, quickly shoving the check deep into the pocket of my dress.
He did not hesitate. Julian lunged across the room with terrifying speed. He grabbed me by the throat and slammed me backward. My spine hit the wall so hard the breath was forced from my lungs. "Give it to me, you pathetic little failure," he spat, his fingers digging into my windpipe.
"Let her go!" Grandpa Victor yelled, trying to push himself out of the chair. But his legs were too weak. I reached up, clawing desperately at Julian's hands, kicking my legs. "It belongs to me. He gave it to me," I choked out. That was when the flash of his hand came. Julian pulled his arm back and delivered a vicious, open-handed slap directly across my face. The impact sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. It was a strike meant to break a jaw, meant to establish absolute dominance. My vision exploded into a shower of white stars. The sheer force of the blow sent me crashing down onto the hardwood floor. A sharp, metallic taste immediately flooded my mouth as my lips split open against my teeth. I lay there for a second, my ears ringing violently. Through the blurry haze, I saw Vanessa leaning elegantly against the doorframe. She was sipping champagne, a cruel, amused smirk playing on her red lips. "Oh, Julian, honey, be careful," Vanessa drawled, her voice dripping with fake concern. "We would hate to have to call the police on your sister, but you know, if we tell the authorities she was violently abusing a helpless elderly man just to steal his money, she will be locked up for a very long time. It would be a tragedy." They had it all planned out. The narrative was already written. I was the unstable, jealous sister, and they were the noble protectors. If I stayed on that floor, they would take the check. They would take my freedom, and they would finish whatever dark work they were doing to my grandfather. The slap was supposed to break me, to remind me of my place at the bottom of the family hierarchy. Instead, it flipped a switch deep inside my brain. The quiet, compliant sister died on that hardwood floor. I spat a mouthful of blood onto the pristine rug. Drawing on years of intense self-defense training I took precisely because I never trusted the people in my world. I spun onto my back. I brought my right leg up and drove my heel squarely into the side of Julian's kneecap with every ounce of strength I possessed. A sickening pop echoed through the room. Julian let out a high-pitched scream of agony, his leg buckling instantly as he collapsed, clutching his knee. I scrambled to my feet. Vanessa dropped her champagne glass, her smirk turning into a look of absolute panic as I charged toward the door. She tried to step in my way, reaching out with her perfectly manicured hands. I did not stop. I lowered my shoulder and shoved her violently into the heavy wooden dresser. She went down in a tangle of expensive silk and shattered crystal. I burst out of the room, sprinting down the hallway. I ignored the confused shouts of the party guests as I tore through the living room and out the massive front doors. The humid Miami night air hit my face, cooling the stinging heat of my cheek. I ran across the manicured lawn toward the dark street, the taste of my own blood on my tongue, my fingers gripping the $60,000 lifeline in my pocket. I had no family left, but I had a mission, and the war had just begun. The adrenaline carried me all the way to the financial district. I did not go to my apartment. Going home would be a rookie mistake, and I was no rookie. Instead, I drove my sedan into the subterranean parking garage of a nondescript glass building downtown. This was the headquarters of Synapse Vanguard Intelligence. You will not find that name in any corporate registry or public directory. We are a private, off-the-books, intelligence agency dealing strictly in cyber threat analysis for clients who do not want the government looking into their affairs. That was my real job. My family thought I fixed printers for a mid-level IT firm because that was the cover story I fed them. They had no idea I spent my days dismantling digital terrorist networks and tracking untraceable funds. I sat behind the steering wheel for hours, the engine off, the concrete silence of the underground level pressing in on me. The split on my lip throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache. I kept the dome light off, clutching the $60,000 check in my trembling hands. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my grandfather's desperate stare and felt the humiliating sting of my brother's hand across my face. Julian thought he had won. He thought physical violence was the ultimate trump card. He did not realize he had just dragged a cyber warfare specialist into a digital street fight. At exactly 8:45 in the morning, I walked through the heavy revolving doors of Equinox Heritage Bank. The lobby was a cathedral of polished marble, hushed whispers, and old money. I approached the front desk, ignoring the receptionist's brief look of concern at my bruised and swollen face, and demanded to see Marcus Thorne. Marcus was a man in his late 50s, possessing the stiff posture of someone who had spent 30 years guarding the secrets of the ultra-wealthy. When he ushered me into his private office, he offered a polite, practiced smile. That smile vanished the second I slid the crumpled check across his mahogany desk. "My grandfather told me to give this directly to you," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. Marcus picked up the paper by the edges, treating it like a live explosive. He flipped it over, his face drained of all color, turning a sickly shade of ash. He did not say a word. He stood up, walked swiftly to his office door, twisted the deadbolt shut, and pulled down the privacy blinds. "Elisa," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper as he returned to his desk. "Do you have any idea what this is?" "It is a check for $60,000, I replied, my eyes narrowing at his panic. "No, it is not," Marcus stated flatly. He pointed a trembling finger at a long, seemingly random string of alphanumeric characters scribbled just beneath my grandfather's signature on the endorsement line. "Your grandfather knew Julian monitors every single digital transaction, every email, and every phone call that leaves that house. So, Victor used the most ancient, analog method possible to bypass a high-tech surveillance net, a piece of paper. This is not a bank routing number. It is an encrypted digital wallet address, an offline cold storage vault." My mind raced, the pieces violently slamming together. "Julian is draining him," I stated, remembering my grandfather's warning. Marcus collapsed heavily into his leather chair, rubbing his temples. 6 months ago, Julian brought in a medical mandate. He used a court order to establish full legal guardianship over your grandfather. The moment the judge signed that paper, Julian seized absolute control over Victor's $5 million trust fund. I tried to flag the withdrawals, but Julian's paperwork was perfectly bulletproof. Legally, he has the right to move every single cent. "He is using it," I whispered, the sickening reality washing over me. "The tech startup, the Series A funding, he does not have a real product. He is using my grandfather's money to artificially inflate his company's valuation.
Before Marcus could confirm my suspicion, a sharp, piercing alarm tone erupted from his desktop computer.
The large monitor dominating his desk flashed violently, turning entirely blood red. Bold black text crawled across the screen, indicating a massive security override protocol was currently in progress.
"What is happening?" I demanded, leaning over the desk.
Marcus furiously typed on his keyboard, his eyes wide with genuine terror. "It is a top-tier administrative override. Someone is accessing the bank's central mainframe using your family's master account credentials. They are executing a targeted freeze command." He looked up at me, panic setting in. "It is Julian. He is locking down your personal checking and savings accounts. He is trying to digitally erase you so you cannot fight back or hire a lawyer." Julian was moving faster than I anticipated. He was trying to cut off my oxygen, but he was fighting on my battlefield now. "Let him have my personal accounts," I ordered, my voice turning into ice. I rounded the desk and stood over Marcus's shoulder. "I do not care about my savings. I need you to pull the internal routing code for the original trust fund account before Julian locks you out of the system too. Do it right now."
"Elisa, that is a severe breach of bank protocol," Marcus stammered, his hands hovering over the keyboard. "If I bypass the firewall to give you that data, I could go to federal prison."
"If you do not give me that data, Julian is going to walk away with $5 million of stolen money, and my grandfather is going to die a prisoner in his own home," I fired back, leaning in close. "Look at the pattern. Marcus, Julian is moving millions of dollars into untraceable offshore crypto wallets. This is not just elder abuse or a family dispute anymore. He is laundering money. This is a federal financial crime. Now, give me that internal routing code, or I swear to God, when the authorities rip his empire apart, I will make sure your name is listed as an accomplice." Marcus swallowed hard, staring at my bruised face and the unwavering resolve in my eyes. The computer monitor continued to flash its angry red warning. With a shaking breath, his fingers hit the keys. He bypassed the standard security gateway, diving deep into the bank's legacy mainframe. A small, black command terminal popped up on the screen, revealing a 32-character internal routing key.
"Write it down," Marcus urged, stepping back from the desk. "You have exactly 60 seconds before Julian's algorithm detects my manual override and shuts down this entire branch's network." I did not need a pen. I have a photographic memory for code. I burned the 32 characters into my brain, turned my back on Marcus Thorne, and unlocked the office door. I had the key. Now, it was time to tear down the castle.
I bypassed my apartment entirely and drove straight to the subterranean bunker that housed the Synapse Vanguard Intelligence Laboratory. The facility was a sensory deprivation chamber of humming servers, industrial cooling fans, and high-level biometric security checkpoints. I swiped my encrypted access badge, cleared the retinal scanner, and locked myself inside Analytical Vault Number 4. The room was aggressively air-conditioned, designed to keep the massive mainframe processors from overheating, but I was burning up from the inside out. The adrenaline from the morning was beginning to curdle into a cold, calculated fury. I dropped into the ergonomic chair and woke up the primary terminal. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard with a punishing, relentless rhythm. I pulled up our proprietary tracking software, a network analysis program the government did not even know existed. First, I manually typed in the 32-character internal routing key Marcus had pulled from the bank. Next, I input the encrypted digital wallet address my grandfather had hastily scribbled on the back of that $60,000 check. I hit execute. The massive curved monitor in front of me went pitch black for a split second before a sprawling, complex web of financial data nodes illuminated the screen in glowing blue lines. I was looking directly at the digital anatomy of my brother's empire, and it was entirely rotten. Julian was universally worshipped in the Miami tech scene as a visionary innovator, a genius destined to change the global market. The reality glowing on my screen proved he was nothing more than a glorified high-tech con artist. His financial technology company, the one aggressively courting top-tier venture capitalists for a massive Series A funding round, was a complete ghost ship. There was no revolutionary algorithm. There was no proprietary software code being developed. I dug into the core backend of his platform and found absolutely nothing but smoke and mirrors. He had built a stunning, highly polished user interface that did absolutely nothing functional. It was a highly sophisticated Ponzi scheme. Julian was systematically siphoning massive funds directly from my grandfather's $5 million trust account. He took that stolen money, chopped it up into thousands of untraceable microtransactions, and fed it back into his own company's ecosystem, to the outside world, and to the billionaire investors he was courting. These constant transactions looked like explosive, organic user growth and massive daily revenue. He was using Grandpa Victor's life savings as artificial seed money to bait institutional investors. Once the venture capitalists poured their real money into the company based on these fake metrics, Julian planned to use that fresh capital to cover his tracks, pay off his initial debts, and walk away a legitimate billionaire, leaving everyone else holding an empty bag. But moving millions of dollars of stolen trust fund money requires a heavy-duty washing machine, and that was exactly where my elegant sister-in-law stepped in. Vanessa did not just plan upscale social events. She was the chief money laundering officer of this entire criminal syndicate. I tracked the outbound flow of the digital funds and watched them wash right through her heavily publicized charity foundations. She would host lavish, exclusive galas claiming to raise awareness for various noble causes. During these events, she auctioned off absolutely worthless digital assets, obscure non-fungible tokens minted for mere pennies, an anonymous buyer, which my data conclusively proved was just Julian operating behind a proxy server, would purchase these digital tokens for hundreds of thousands of dollars using my grandfather's hijacked funds. Instantly, the stolen money was transformed into clean, legitimate corporate revenue on Vanessa's tax returns. That clean money flowed directly into anonymous shell companies used to purchase their opulent, disgusting lifestyle. The custom Italian sports cars sitting in their driveway, the winter vacation villa they constantly bragged about, the private jet charters, and even the heavy diamond tennis bracelet my mother wore at the party last night. Every single luxury they flaunted to the world was bought with the blood, sweat, and stolen retirement funds of a helpless old man, heavily mixed with the defrauded capital of blind investors. Julian was a textbook narcissist, and narcissists always believe they are the smartest people in the room. He was incredibly arrogant about his security protocols, utilizing heavy military-grade encryption and routing his primary internet protocol address through dozens of international proxy servers. But his arrogance bred a fatal, amateur laziness. To save a fraction of a millisecond on ping rates, and to maintain absolute, paranoid control over his entire operation, he made a catastrophic infrastructure error. He used the exact same private cloud server cluster to host his fraudulent financial portal and to run the closed-circuit surveillance cameras monitoring my grandfather's room. He tied his billion-dollar federal crime directly to his localized hostage situation. It was a single, glaring point of failure, and I brought a digital sledgehammer. I isolated his master server, bypassed his primary firewall in less than 12 minutes, and gained full administrative privileges over his entire network. I ripped the doors off his digital vault. I initiated a mass download. I pulled every wire transfer receipt, every forged invoice, every deleted email, and hundreds of hours of raw video footage showing his hired doctor forcibly sedating my grandfather. I compiled the massive mountain of data, packaging it into a heavily encrypted, entirely undeniable digital dossier. I thought I had seen the worst of it. I truly believed the financial ruin and the elder abuse was the absolute bottom of the barrel. But as the download neared 99%, I cracked open a hidden directory containing their internal communication logs. It was a private, encrypted messaging application used exclusively by 4 specific mobile devices. I decrypted the master chat file, fully expecting to find Julian and Vanessa plotting their next corporate heist. Instead, the names attached to the timestamps made the blood freeze solid in my veins. Arthur and Beatrice, my own parents. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring, a wave of pure nausea crashing over me as I read the scrolling transcripts. They knew everything. They had known from day one. I read a message from my father actively complaining about the monthly retainer fee for the corrupt private doctor, telling Julian to negotiate a lower rate. Worse, infinitely worse. I found a text sent by my mother just 48 hours ago. She was complaining about the upcoming party logistics, and then she casually asked Julian if they could instruct the doctor to increase the dosage of the heavy sedatives. She wrote, "We really need to speed up the inevitable so we can finally liquidate the rest of the estate before the auditors get suspicious." My hands began to shake violently, not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt blinding. They were not just turning a blind eye to theft. My parents were actively conspiring to murder my grandfather for a faster payout. My family was not just toxic. They were a cartel of monsters cloaked in designer clothes. I hit the final save button on the dossier, the drive locking with a satisfying click. They had taken everything from the only man who ever cared about me. Now, I was going to bury them all. The secure terminal in front of me was still cooling down from the massive data extraction when my burner phone aggressively vibrated against the metal desk. It was an encrypted direct message from an unknown number. Julian had leveraged his stolen capital to hire black hat operatives, bypassing basic carrier security just to ensure this message reached me. I opened the file attached to the text. It was a digital guillotine perfectly engineered for my neck. Julian had meticulously constructed a fabricated cybercrime dossier. He paid a corrupt private security firm to generate fake server logs and spoofed internet protocol addresses that pointed directly to my home network. The fake evidence painted a damning picture. It alleged that I, the jealous and unstable younger sister, had launched a malicious, unprovoked ransomware attack on his financial tech startup, attempting to steal highly classified proprietary documents. Appended to the bottom of the file was a drafted arrest warrant. He was giving me an ultimatum: submit or go to federal prison. A second later, my personal cell phone began to ring endlessly. It displayed 42 missed calls and 15 new voicemails. I clicked the speaker button on the newest message. The suffocating, toxic weight of my family filled the cold laboratory. "Elisa, how could you do this to us?" My mother, Beatrice, sobbed loudly through the speaker. The theatricality of her crying was sickening. "We gave you everything, and you repay us by violently attacking your brother and stealing from a confused old man? You need mental help, sweetie. You always have." The audio shuffled, and my father, Arthur, snatched the receiver. His voice was laced with pure, venomous disgust. "You listen to me. You ungrateful little failure. Julian has the police on standby. If you do not hand over that $60,000 check by tonight, I will personally make sure the district attorney locks you away for 10 years. You are going to sign a legally binding document waiving 100% of your inheritance rights to the Horton estate. You will walk away with nothing, which is exactly what you deserve." The screen flashed again with another text from Julian. He dictated the terms of my surrender. I was commanded to attend his massive Series A fundraising gala happening at 8 o'clock tonight. But he was not hosting it at a hotel. He had chartered a massive, 3-story luxury yacht moored off the coast of the bay. I was ordered to walk onto the main stage in front of hundreds of billionaire investors and tech journalists. I had to publicly apologize to my brother, hand over the physical check to prove I was mentally unwell, and sign the waiver under the blinding flash of cameras. He wanted to use my public humiliation as a PR stunt to solidify his image as the forgiving, benevolent genius. I scoffed, my fingers hovering over the keyboard to block their numbers. Then, the final message arrived. It was a high-resolution photograph. My blood turned to absolute ice. The picture showed my grandfather, Victor, lying motionless on his bed. His eyes were rolled back, his mouth slightly open. Standing over him was Julian's hired private doctor, wearing surgical gloves. The doctor was pushing a syringe filled with a thick, milky liquid directly into my grandfather's intravenous line. Julian's text underneath the photo was brief and entirely devoid of human empathy. A heavy dose of this sedative will slow his heart rate down. A second dose will stop it completely. Old men die of sudden heart failure all the time. Elisa, it is a natural tragedy. Be on that yacht at 8 o'clock with the check and a smile, or you will be attending a funeral tomorrow morning. He had crossed the line from corporate fraud to active hostage negotiation. They were going to kill the only person I loved just to protect their fake empire. The sheer ruthlessness of it physically knocked the wind out of me. For a moment, genuine terror gripped my chest, but a cyber warfare analyst does not panic under a distributed denial of service attack. We isolate the threat, we adapt, and we counterattack. They wanted a broken, defeated victim? I would give them an Oscar-winning performance. I picked up the phone and dialed Julian's private number. He answered on the first ring. I could hear the clinking of expensive glassware and Vanessa laughing in the background. I forced my voice to crack. I began to hyperventilate, squeezing my eyes shut to produce genuine tears of stress, letting my breaths come out in jagged, pathetic gasps. "Julian, please," I cried into the receiver, my voice trembling violently. "Please do not hurt him. I am so sorry. I was just angry. I did not mean to cause all this trouble." "Do you have the check, Elisa?" Julian demanded coldly, though I could hear the sickening edge of victory in his tone. "Yes, I have it," I sobbed louder, wrapping my arms around my chest to make my voice sound smaller, weaker. "I have it, and I will sign whatever Mom and Dad want me to sign. Just tell the doctor to stop. Please, Julian. I will be on the yacht. I will apologize to everyone. Just let Grandpa live." Through the speaker, I heard my mother let out a loud, theatrical sigh of relief. "See, Arthur?" she said in the background. "I told you she just needed to be put in her place. She never had the spine to actually fight us. Make sure you wear something presentable for once. Elisa," Julian ordered, his voice dripping with absolute arrogance and unearned power. "Do not embarrass me in front of the press. 8 o'clock. Do not be late." The line went dead. I lowered the phone from my ear. The tears immediately stopped. The jagged breathing vanished, replaced by a slow, measured exhale. I stared at the black screen of my device. They were celebrating on their luxury yacht, entirely convinced that their toxic family authority had once again crushed my spirit. They thought I was a terrified little girl crawling back to beg for mercy. They had no idea they had just handed a loaded digital weapon the exact coordinates of their final destruction. I wiped the single fake tear from my cheek. The game of defense was over. It was time to build a Trojan horse. The metallic echo of my fake sobs faded into the hum of the cooling servers. I dragged a tissue across my face, wiping away the remnants of my performance. The paralyzing fear that had gripped my chest just moments ago evaporated entirely, leaving behind a terrifying, absolute clarity. I was no longer the victim in their twisted family narrative. I was the architect of their impending destruction. I pulled up a secure, heavily encrypted communication channel on my secondary monitor. I dialed a direct, unlisted number for Special Agent David Vance at the Federal Bureau of Investigation, specifically the Cyber Financial Crimes Division. The Bureau, along with the Securities and Exchange Commission, had been circling Julian's startup for over 8 months. They suspected massive irregularities but could never pierce his military-grade firewalls to secure hard evidence. "Vance," the gruff voice answered on the second ring. "Agent Vance, this is Elisa Horton," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I have the internal server logs, the proxy routing data, and the offshore crypto wallet addresses for my brother's entire operation. It is a massive Ponzi scheme laundering millions. I am sending you a secure file right now. You have 10 seconds to accept the handshake protocol." I hit the enter key. "I will need a tactical raid team standing by tonight at 8 o'clock sharp, and I need the Coast Guard. They are hosting a gala on a chartered yacht in the bay." "I am looking at the data now," Vance muttered, his breath catching slightly. "We got him. Horton, we will be waiting in the water, with the federal hammer officially cocked." I turned my attention to the most critical piece of the board, my grandfather. I switched over to the internal network of Synapse Vanguard Intelligence. We employed some of the most lethal, highly trained private extraction specialists in the country. I authorized a maximum budget deployment using my own operational funds. I established a direct line with Commander Reyes, the head of our tactical response unit. "I need a ghost extraction," I ordered. "Target is a 78-year-old male hostage held in the west wing of the Horton estate. The primary targets will be leaving the premises for a gala at approximately 7 o'clock. Wait until their vehicles clear the front gates. Then, breach the perimeter. Neutralize the hired medical staff holding him, and secure the package. Bring a mobile trauma unit. He is heavily sedated. Get him to a secure black site hospital." "Understood," Reyes replied. "We will have eyes on the perimeter in 30 minutes. The board was set. Now, I needed to build the ultimate weapon. I took the crumpled $60,000 check out of my pocket and smoothed it flat on the desk. In the bottom corner of the paper was a small standard quick response code, typically used by tellers to verify the physical document. I scanned the code into my closed network. My fingers flew across the keyboard, writing a highly aggressive, self-executing malicious script, a classic Trojan horse. I embedded the malicious payload directly into the digital signature of the quick response code. I knew exactly how Julian operated. He was obsessed with public humiliation. He would not just take the check from me privately. He would demand to scan it in front of his investors using the yacht's presentation system, supposedly to prove the funds were returning to the company. The moment the optical scanner on that yacht read this altered code, my payload would instantly bypass their local security, hijack the central audiovisual server, and grant me total, unrestricted access to every single screen and speaker on that vessel. I closed the terminal. It was time to put on my armor. I left the laboratory and drove to a high-end boutique downtown for 30 years. My mother had rigidly policed my wardrobe, forcing me into dull, muted colors so I would never outshine Vanessa's radiant presence. Not tonight. I purchased a breathtaking, floor-length evening gown in a shade of brilliant, unapologetic crimson red. The silk clung to my frame like a second skin. In the dressing room mirror, I carefully applied heavy foundation and concealer, flawlessly masking the purple and blue bruising on the corner of my mouth where Julian had struck me. I painted my lips a deep scarlet to match the dress. I pulled my hair back into a sleek, severe style that left my face completely exposed. I did not look like the quiet tech support girl anymore. I looked like an executioner. At exactly 8 o'clock, I stepped out of a black sedan at the bustling marina. The cool night breeze blew off the water, carrying the distant sound of a string quartet playing on the top deck of the massive, illuminated super yacht. Through the expansive glass windows of the main deck, I could see Julian, Vanessa, and my parents holding court. They were clinking crystal glasses, laughing with billionaires, utterly convinced they had won the war. They thought they had broken the rebellious daughter, securing their stolen wealth forever. I walked up the wooden gangway, my high heels clicking rhythmically against the planks. The $60,000 check was tucked safely inside my silver clutch. My face was a mask of perfect, icy calm. They were waiting for a terrified, defeated victim to crawl onto their stage. They were about to welcome a digital monster right into the heart of their empire. I stepped through the gilded double doors and walked into the grand ballroom of the super yacht. The sheer scale of the vessel was staggering, a floating palace of polished mahogany and glass, designed specifically to intimidate and impress. The room was packed with hundreds of the wealthiest venture capitalists, tech journalists, and elite politicians in the state. Waiters in crisp white tuxedos navigated the sea of designer gowns and bespoke suits, carrying silver trays loaded with champagne and beluga caviar. At the far end of the room, positioned right in front of a massive wall-to-wall light-emitting diode presentation screen, stood my family. Julian, Arthur, Beatrice, and Vanessa were holding court. They were arranged like a portrait of American royalty, radiating an untouchable, arrogant glow. The moment I stepped into their line of sight, the crimson-red silk of my gown catching the crystal chandelier light. Their laughter abruptly stopped. My mother's eyes widened in sheer horror at my wardrobe choice. Julian's face hardened for a fraction of a second before twisting into a sickening, victorious smirk. He leaned over and whispered something to Vanessa, who covered her mouth to hide a cruel, mocking laugh. They thought they were looking at a broken dog finally coming to heel. Julian tapped his champagne flute with a silver spoon. The sharp, clear, ringing sound instantly silenced the murmuring crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed investors, and members of the press," Julian announced, his voice projecting through the yacht's state-of-the-art surround sound system. He flashed his signature, charismatic smile. "Before we dive into the incredible financial projections for our Series A funding, I want to take a moment for something far more important: family." He gestured dramatically toward me. The sea of billionaires parted, leaving a clear path down the center of the room. "My younger sister, Elisa, has struggled for a long time," Julian continued, perfectly playing the role of the benevolent, long-suffering savior. His voice was thick with fake sympathy. "She has battled some severe personal demons and made some terrible, misguided decisions recently regarding our grandfather's estate. But tonight, she has chosen to step into the light. She has come here to make things right, to return what does not belong to her, and to publicly heal our family. Elisa, please, come up here." The crowd applauded politely, their faces filled with pity for the supposedly troubled younger sister. I kept my chin raised and my posture perfectly straight. I walked down the makeshift aisle, the heels of my shoes clicking against the hardwood floor with the measured rhythm of a ticking clock. I climbed the 3 steps onto the brightly lit stage and stood directly in front of my brother. "Hand it over. Right now," Julian whispered through his teeth, his smile frozen in place while his eyes burned with a vicious threat. "And read the apology exactly as I sent it to you, or the old man stops breathing in 10 minutes. I reached into my silver clutch. I did not pull out the piece of paper he wanted. I pulled out the original, handwritten $60,000 check. "To ensure complete financial transparency for our new board of directors," Julian announced loudly to the room, snatching a mobile optical scanner from the podium, "we are going to log this returned cashier's check directly into our corporate ledger right here, right now."
He held the device out to me. "Go ahead, Elisa, scan it."
I looked at my parents standing in the front row. They were practically vibrating with relief. I looked at Vanessa, who was already raising her glass to take a celebratory sip. Finally, I looked directly into Julian's arrogant eyes. I smiled, a genuine, terrifying smile. I took the check and swiped the quick response code directly over the glowing red laser of his optical scanner. The device beeped. Instantly, my custom Trojan virus bypassed his local area network, violently severing his administrative control and hijacking the yacht's central server. The massive presentation screen behind us flickered violently. The sleek, professionally designed corporate logo vanished, replaced entirely by a wall of harsh, blinding static. The yacht's speaker system let out a deafening, high-pitched screech of audio feedback that forced several investors in the front row to cover their ears in pain. "Turn that off!" Julian yelled at the audio-visual technicians stationed at the back of the room. "Cut the feed right now." But they could not. The system belonged to me now. The static cleared. In its place, towering 20 feet high, appeared the undeniable, horrifying architecture of Julian's Ancien Empire, the screen populated with hundreds of banking spreadsheets. Red lines connected the stolen funds from my grandfather's trust account directly to the fake corporate revenue streams. Beside that, a high-resolution flowchart laid bare the entire money laundering operation. It showed exact dates, times, and amounts of how Vanessa used her charity galas to purchase worthless digital tokens, washing the stolen money into their private offshore accounts. The crowd gasped. The polite silence shattered into a chaotic roar of confusion and outrage. Billionaires were already pulling out their cell phones, desperately calling their legal teams. "Shut down the main breaker!" Arthur screamed, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple as he charged toward the stage. But the final nail in their coffin had just begun to play. The spreadsheet shrank to the side of the screen, making way for an audio-visual file. It was a recording of my parents from 48 hours ago. The crystal-clear audio blasted through the ballroom, leaving absolutely zero room for misinterpretation. My mother's voice echoed through the yacht. "We really need to speed up the inevitable so we can finally liquidate the rest of the estate before the auditors get suspicious." My father's voice followed. "Just tell the doctor to up the dose. His heart is weak anyway. No one will ask questions." Beatrice let out a blood-curdling shriek of pure terror, covering her face with her hands. Arthur stopped dead in his tracks, his jaw dropping as the room turned on them with absolute physical disgust. People were backing away from them as if they were infected with a lethal virus. Julian lunged at the podium, frantically smashing his fists against the keyboard, desperately trying to pull the plug. Then, the screen transitioned one last time. The financial documents faded into a live, high-definition video feed broadcasting directly from a secure government hospital room. Sitting up in a pristine medical bed, surrounded by federal agents, was my grandfather, Victor. The heavy sedatives had been flushed from his system. His posture was rigid, his eyes blazing with the fierce, undeniable authority of the patriarch he had always been. "Julian Horton," my grandfather's deep, steady voice thundered through the ballroom. "I am fully awake, I am of sound mind, and I see exactly what you are." Julian froze, all the blood completely draining from his face. He staggered backward, his legs giving out as he stared up at the screen in absolute disbelief. "Effective immediately," Victor declared, staring straight into the camera lens. "I am legally revoking all powers of attorney and medical guardianship previously granted to Julian Horton. Furthermore, I am formally submitting all documented evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and attempted murder to the Federal Bureau of Investigation." As if summoned by his words, the deafening roar of a heavy tactical helicopter suddenly drowned out the music. Outside the massive glass windows, the dark waters of the bay erupted in blinding searchlights. 3 heavily armored Coast Guard interceptor vessels slammed against the side of the super yacht. The ballroom doors were kicked open. Dozens of federal agents in full tactical gear poured into the room, their weapons drawn, shouting over the chaos. "Federal agents, nobody move! Hands where we can see them!" The investors threw their hands in the air, scrambling to get out of the line of fire. 2 massive agents charged the stage. Julian tried to run, letting out a pathetic, cowardly scream. He did not make it 2 steps. An agent tackled him from behind. Julian crashed hard onto the polished wood, his custom Italian suit tearing as the agent drove a knee into his spine and violently yanked his arms behind his back. The sharp click of heavy steel handcuffs locking around his wrists echoed perfectly over the microphone still resting on the podium. Below the stage, Vanessa was sobbing hysterically, screaming about her diplomatic immunity as a female officer shoved her face against a cocktail table and placed her under arrest. My parents, Arthur and Beatrice, completely broke down, the illusion of their wealth and power shattered into a million pieces. My father fell to his knees, openly weeping. My mother crawled toward the edge of the stage, her expensive makeup running down her face in dark, ugly streaks. "Elisa, please," Beatrice begged, her voice cracking with desperation. "Tell them it is a mistake. You are our daughter. Please, save us." I did not flinch. I did not shed a single tear. I stepped right past my mother's reaching hands and walked down to where Julian was pinned against the floor. He craned his neck, looking up at me with absolute, unfiltered terror. I looked down at him, the crimson red of my dress glowing under the flashing tactical lights. "You were right," I said, my voice cold, steady, and loud enough for him to hear over the sirens. "I do not know how to run a business. I only know how to tear them down." I turned my back on them forever. I walked out of the chaotic ballroom, stepping past the federal agents and the terrified billionaires, and pushed through the heavy glass doors onto the open deck of the yacht. The cool, salty wind of the Miami Bay washed over my face, blowing my hair back. I leaned against the heavy steel railing, watching the flashing red and blue lights paint the water. Down below, they were dragging my family away in chains. For the first time in my 30 years of life, my chest felt completely light. I was finally free. Tomorrow, I would bring my grandfather home, and then I would start a brand new life, built on my own terms, and completely mine. Thank you all so much for listening to my story today. Where in the world are you tuning in from? If you found today's story engaging, please consider helping us with just $1. You can scan the donation QR code on your screen or use the donation link in the description or the pinned comment. Your support allows our channel to pay our incredible staff, helping them feed their families and continue creating even better stories for you. Thank you again, and stay strong.